For years, growth stocks dominated the conversation. Mega-cap technology, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and semiconductors became the center of the market. But in 2026, something interesting is happening. Value stocks are beginning to show much stronger relative performance. Financials are participating. Industrials are participating. Energy has become more important. And market leadership looks less concentrated than it did when a small group of mega-cap growth companies seemed to carry everything. So is this finally the beginning of a real value cycle? Maybe, but before selling your growth stocks and buying everything with a low price-to-earnings ratio, we need to define exactly what is happening, because value has clearly gained momentum recently, but that does not mean growth has suddenly lost 2026. The answer depends heavily on the period you measure, and when we look at the actual scoreboard, the story becomes much more interesting.
Through August 21st, the S&P 500 Growth Index was still slightly ahead for the year. Growth was up roughly 12.6%. The S&P 500 Value was up roughly 11.5%. So if you only look at year-to-date performance, saying that value has already defeated growth would be premature. But now look at the current quarter. Value was up about 4.2%. Growth was up only around 0.8%. That is a much more meaningful difference. So we are seeing a rotation. The question is whether that rotation lasts long enough to become a new market regime. This distinction matters because financial headlines can easily say value is outperforming while using a 3-week or 3-month window. Another headline might use year-to-date numbers and say the exact opposite. And there's another complication. Even if we agree on the time period, we still need to agree on what we mean by value because different indexes define it differently. When someone says value stocks are outperforming growth stocks, the first question should be, according to which index? The S&P 500 Value Index uses one methodology, Russell uses another, and a pure value index can create a much stronger factor bet than a broad value index. The same problem exists on the growth side. Different indexes use different combinations of valuation ratios, sales growth, earnings growth, momentum, and other characteristics. So two ETFs with the word value in their names can own noticeably different portfolios. One might still contain large, high-quality companies with moderate valuations. Another may heavily concentrate in the cheapest companies in the market. That can create very different performance. So when you hear that value is winning, do not stop at the label. Look underneath the index. Once we do that, another pattern becomes visible. A large part of the current value rotation is connected to which sectors are gaining leadership. One of the biggest reasons value has gained ground is that market leadership has broadened. Financials have been stronger. Energy has contributed. Industrials have become more important. Meanwhile, technology has not dominated every part of the market the way it did during some previous periods. That creates a natural tailwind for value indexes because those indexes tend to have larger allocations to financials, energy, industrials, and other mature businesses. Higher bond yields can also change the relative attractiveness of different stocks. When capital has a higher discount rate, investors may become less willing to pay extreme multiples for profits expected far into the future. That does not automatically make every value stock attractive, but it can make current earnings and current free cash flow more valuable relative to distant expectations. And this brings us to one of the biggest arguments in favor of value right now, the valuation gap. A growth company can be an incredible business and still be a disappointing investment. The reason is price. When investors pay a very high valuation, they are already assuming a lot of future success, strong revenue growth, strong margins, strong free cash flow, and usually many years of continued expansion. That means the company may have to produce excellent results just to justify the valuation investors already paid. Value stocks usually begin with lower expectations, lower price-to-earnings ratios, lower price-to-sales multiples, and often much more of their value comes from cash flows being generated today rather than 10 years from now. That creates a larger margin for disappointment.
But cheap does not automatically mean better. The price only tells you what expectations are embedded in the stock. We still need to understand why higher interest rates can make those differences even more important. Think of many growth stocks as long-duration assets. A large portion of their estimated value depends on profits they may generate many years into the future. When interest rates and discount rates rise, those distant cash flows become worth less in today's dollars. That can put pressure on valuations. Value companies often generate a larger portion of their expected cash flows today, so relatively speaking, they can be less sensitive to the same increase in discount rates. This is not a perfect rule. Some growth companies generate enormous cash flow right now, and some value companies are extremely sensitive to rates. But as a broad framework, higher yields can make expensive long-duration equities harder to justify. That helps explain why value can become more competitive when bond yields remain elevated. However, there is a dangerous shortcut investors often make at this point. They see a low valuation and assume they have found a bargain, but valuation without business quality can be a trap. If you are going to invest in value stocks, a low PE ratio should be the beginning of the analysis, not the end. Ask what is happening to earnings. Are profits improving or deteriorating? Look at free cash flow. Is the business actually generating cash? Look at the balance sheet. Is debt manageable? And look at return on capital. Is management still creating economic value with the money invested in the business? The strongest value opportunity is usually not simply a cheap stock. It is a reasonably priced business where fundamentals are better than the market expects. Cheap plus improving fundamentals can be powerful. Cheap plus deteriorating fundamentals can be extremely dangerous. And that second category has a name every value investor needs to know: the value trap. Before we get into that, a quick interruption. If you like market analysis that goes beyond saying value good or growth good, subscribe to Boring Money Wins and hit the like button. Because style investing only becomes useful when we understand what is actually driving the returns, and that is especially important with value. A low valuation can mean the market is making a mistake, but it can also mean the market sees a problem that the investor is ignoring. The difference between those two situations is where real analysis begins. So let's look at the biggest mistake investors make when searching for cheap stocks. Imagine a company trading at 12 times earnings. It looks cheap. Then the stock falls and the multiple drops to 9. Now it looks even cheaper. Then it falls again and trades at 7 times earnings. At first glance, that sounds like an incredible bargain. But what if revenue is declining, margins are shrinking, free cash flow is disappearing, debt is increasing, and competitors are taking market share? The stock did not become cheaper because investors suddenly became irrational. The business became worse. That is a value trap. A low valuation only matters if the future economics of the company justify a higher value than the market currently assigns. This is why serious value investing combines valuation with business quality. And interestingly, when we move away from mega-cap stocks and look at smaller companies, the value versus growth story becomes even stronger. Small-cap value has already shown stronger relative leadership. For the year ending April 30th, 2026, the Russell 2000 Value Index returned roughly 46.3%. Russell 2000 Growth returned about 42.6%. That is a value advantage of roughly 3.7 percentage points. Now, that does not mean small-cap value suddenly became safe. Small companies can have weaker balance sheets. They can depend more heavily on borrowing. Their businesses can be more sensitive to economic conditions, and volatility can be much higher. But it shows why saying growth is still winning or value is winning without specifying market capitalization can be misleading. Large-cap growth can behave very differently from small-cap growth, and small-cap value can have a completely different cycle from large-cap value. But even with this evidence of broader value leadership, there is one conclusion I would strongly avoid. Growth is not dead. A value rotation does not erase the structural trends supporting growth companies. Artificial intelligence spending is still real. Semiconductor demand remains tied to enormous computing requirements.
Cloud infrastructure continues expanding, and many software businesses continue generating recurring revenue and strong margins. If a company can compound earnings at a high rate for many years, paying a reasonable premium can absolutely make sense. The problem is not growth. The problem is paying any price for growth. The same principle works in reverse. The problem is not value. The problem is buying weak businesses simply because they look statistically cheap. The best long-term opportunities often combine both ideas: strong business economics and a valuation that does not require perfection. And once we look deeper at value and growth indexes, another important truth appears. A lot of what investors call style performance is actually sector performance. Value indexes tend to own more financials, energy, industrials, and defensive companies. Growth indexes tend to have much heavier exposure to technology, communication services, and other faster-growing businesses. So imagine financials rally, energy performs well, industrials strengthen, and technology goes sideways. Even if nothing fundamentally changes about the value factor itself, value indexes can outperform simply because their sector exposures are working. That is why sector composition matters. When you buy a value ETF, you're not purchasing some abstract academic concept called value, you're buying actual companies in actual sectors. The same applies to growth. This becomes particularly important when choosing ETFs because different funds can give you radically different levels of exposure to the factor. So let's look at what investors are actually buying when they choose a value or growth ETF. VTV is a broad large-cap value ETF. IWD tracks a Russell-based large-cap value universe. RPV takes the idea much further by targeting stronger pure value characteristics. Those three funds can all be described as value ETFs, but they are not identical bets. RPV can behave much more aggressively because it concentrates harder in the factor. The same distinction exists on the growth side. VUG and IWF offer broad, large-cap growth exposure, but their methodologies and holdings are not exactly the same. This is why ETF selection matters. If you want a mild value tilt, a broad value fund may be enough. If you buy a pure value strategy, you are making a much stronger factor bet. And stronger factor exposure means both the upside and the periods of painful underperformance can become larger. Which brings us to the practical question. If value momentum is improving in 2026, should you rotate out of growth right now? I would be very careful about making an aggressive rotation simply because value has recently started outperforming. That is performance chasing in a different costume. One option is to own a broad market core and make no style bet at all. Another is to maintain that broad market core and add a modest value tilt. A third approach is a barbell, where you intentionally own both value and growth exposure. What I would avoid is selling a well-designed portfolio every time market leadership changes. If growth has dramatically outperformed and your allocation is now above target, rebalancing some of that exposure back toward value can make sense. But that is different from trying to predict the next 6 months. Rebalancing restores your intended risk. Market timing tries to guess the next winner. And if this really is the beginning of a longer value cycle, there are several signals that should keep confirming the story. So are value stocks finally outperforming growth in 2026? The most accurate answer is, recently, yes. Universally, not yet. Value has gained meaningful momentum and market leadership is becoming broader. But large cap growth was still slightly ahead year to date through August 21st. For the value case to become stronger, I would watch several things. First, earnings breadth. Are more companies outside mega cap technology growing profits? Second, relative valuations. Does the gap between expensive growth and cheaper value remain large enough to matter? Third, bond yields. Higher yields can continue to challenge expensive long-duration equities. Fourth, watch financials and industrials. If those sectors continue participating, broader value leadership becomes more credible.
And finally, watch overall market breadth. If more of the market contributes to returns instead of just a handful of giant technology companies, the environment becomes much healthier for value. But I would not buy value simply because it is cheap, and I would not abandon growth simply because its leadership has weakened. The better goal is to own good businesses at prices that give you a reasonable chance of earning a strong return. Because over the long run, the most useful distinction may not be value versus growth. It may be price versus quality.